Welcome back to Yoshi Entertainment, everybody. So briefly, I would like to talk about this situation, this lawsuit that has been filed concerning Don Richard, who is one of the former members of the girl group, the lady group, if you will, Danity Kane, and she was also half of the duo that was P. Devil Combs's Dirty Money, that group as well. She is, and y'all know I have to say allegedly, right, suing him, and I quote, on 21 counts of sexual assault and battery, sex trafficking, gender discrimination, and copyright infringement, according to court documents obtained by USA Today Wednesday, end quote. There are some other things she mentioned in this lawsuit that's very disturbing that many people have been talking about, and I quote, Richard also names former Bad Boy president Harve Pierre. Interscope Records and Bad Boy Records, among others, in the 55-page lawsuit filed Tuesday. Richard, 41, claims the producer stole her work, withheld payment, and subjected her to inhumane working conditions, which included assault, groping, and false imprisonment over the course of nearly a decade. End quote. Now, the reason why I put some emphasis on that name, Harve Pierre, is because this is not the first time his name has come up in one of these lawsuits as somebody who was also being filed something against, so to speak. Remember, we also talked about another lawsuit where he was one of the other people besides P. Devil Combs, who was one of the people listed that had done something to somebody. Y'all know I have to say allegedly. Now, of course, P. Devil Combs' attorney came and do what all the attorneys and lawyers do, lie through their teeth, and basically tried to make it seem like this woman was just pulling lies out of a hat, allegedly. They tried to say that she was trying to make, and I quote, an attempt to rewrite history, end quote. And this was some attempt, once again, to, and I quote, manufacture a series of false claims, all in the hopes of trying to get a payday, end quote. Allegedly. Once again, we all know that this is the kind of thing, these are the kind of statements that the lawyers and the attorneys of people like P. Devil Combs is going to make. Everything is a lie coming out of somebody's mouth. But what did I say before? Not everybody is lying on people. They also tried to pull the whole, oh, well, if it was so bad, why did she stay? Why didn't she leave card? And I quote, if Miss Richard had such a negative experience with making the band and Danity Kane, she would not have chosen to continue working directly with Mr. Combs for Dirty Money, nor would she have returned for the Making the Band reboot in 2020 or agreed to be featured on the Love album last year, end quote. And we'll talk about why they're trying to throw this in her face, basically, and why it's raggedy and disgusting of them to try and throw that in her face, considering the things that she is alleging in this lawsuit. Aside from all the other things that she alleged, I know I have to say alleged, in the lawsuit, like him being verbally abusive, physically abusive, withholding her earnings, she also alleged that he would not allow her to eat properly, that anytime that she tried to take a break or rest, he wouldn't allow it. Essentially, he was working this woman and the rest of them like Hebrew slaves, allegedly. And that she also witnessed him abusing Cassie. That's another thing that she mentioned in this lawsuit. This is why I keep saying not everybody is lying. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And this many people are coming out saying the same thing. Like, ain't that many conspiracy theories in the world? And I hate it when people use those words and terms because it gaslights the truth. And I quote, Richard alleged that Combs flagrantly exploited her as a singer and a writer by withholding her earnings, stealing her copyrighted works, and subjecting her to years of inhumane working conditions. Combs, the complaint said, manipulated Richard with mantras that submission to his depraved demands was necessary for career advancement, which instilled in Richard the belief that such abuse and exploitation were required for female artists to succeed in the music industry. Now, we've seen this before. This is not something new. You know, people, once again, want to try to gaslight people, make it seem like people are crazy for the things that they say in these lawsuits. We have seen multiple young women who have filed lawsuits, made complaints with the social media, and said that they felt pressured to do X, Y, Z in order to get their music out. Let's take it all the way back to Ashanti and Irv Gotti. How many times did she say that that man practically told her, either you can lay down with me or good luck with getting your music put out? They have this stigma where they try to force women to do certain things, be subjected to abuse, manipulation, things that are not right, in order to get advanced in the music industry. That is the name of the game. If we don't know this by now, by all the artists who have come out and explained it, then I don't know what's going on. Somebody's got their head in the clouds somewhere. By now, like I said, we should understand that is how it is, unfortunately, in the industry. This is a secular, ungodly music industry. It should not be that hard to believe, like I said. Remember, I also said on this channel that if you don't play by their sick-minded games, they punish you. And I quote, when Miss Richard resisted Mr. Combs' advances, Mr. Combs retaliated by denying her singing parts in songs, removing her from songs, refusing to allow her to sing in performances, and turning her microphone off during performances. The more Miss Richard rebuffed his advances, the more Mr. Combs' retaliatory behavior increased, the complaint said, end quote. Once again, and I quote, Richard named Combs, record executive Harve Pierre, Remote Productions, Sony Music Publishing, and several Bad Boy and Combs branded businesses, among others, as defendants. She wants a jury trial and unspecified compensatory damages, a financial judgment for mental pain, anguish, and emotional distress, punitive and exemplary damages, and payment of legal fees. Richard alleged in the lawsuit that she witnessed Combs physically abusing and brutally beating Ventura on numerous occasions, and she said she was threatened by the rapper producer when she intervened. Mr. Combs' namesake temper frequently manifested in physical violence. Her attorneys, Lisa Bloom and Eric Fudali, argued in the complaint, alleging that Combs regularly hurled objects in fits of rage, often throwing items such as mobile phones, laptops, food, and studio equipment across the room or at people. His persistent abuse included choking and strangling Ventura, striking her with his hands and with objects, slapping her, punching her, and throwing items at her, including a scalding hot pan, the attorneys alleged, end quote. And if you thought that was bad, well, buckle your seatbelts and hold on to your butts, because it gets worse. Now, another article alleges, and I quote, the singer claims to have seen Porter's face battered while she cried, leaving a music studio in 2005, realizing that Mr. Combs was capable of committing acts of violence against women, caused Miss Richard to feel deep apprehension and fear that Mr. Combs could one day physically harm her, according to the lawsuit. She also talked about how she did witness, according to her, allegedly, y'all know I have to say allegedly, Diddy assaulting Cassie. We'll talk about that more later, although I'm sure that did nothing but add to that apprehension that she was speaking of. Basically, in so many words, I'm putting my own spin, if you will, based on what's being said here, what's being alleged, the truth that we all know. Basically, Miss Dawn Richard was basically like, well, if he's putting hands on Cassie, and these are the types, according to the phenotype, let's be blatantly honest, that they claim that they all want down there in Hollywood, he's putting hands on the one he claims he wants so bad, and the mother of his children, for crying out loud. If he can't keep his hands off at least the two of them, what is he going to do to me if I step out of line, if I make him upset, if he says something, or I can't do whatever sick-minded, crazy, unrealistic, unfair thing he's requiring of me? It's not going to be good. So I don't blame her for feeling scared. Like, no woman wants to watch another man beat who's supposed to be his girlfriend in front of her. Because what he does to her, he will most certainly do to another woman. And I quote, she also details multiple instances where she claims to have seen Diddy assault Cassie. In one, she said a high on drugs Diddy, 54 at the time, slammed Cassie, 38 at the time, against a wall, choked her, and dragged her up to the stairs in his home in Los Angeles during the recording of Diddy Dirty Money's album Last Train to Paris in 2009. The following day, she and fellow Diddy Dirty Money singer Kalenna Harper were locked in a room for over 20 minutes as Diddy threatened them and told them not to speak of the incident. She wanted to intervene and help Miss Ventura, but Miss Harper adamantly refused to intervene in Mr. Combs' relationship and physically led Miss Richard out of the residence. She claims in the lawsuit, on occasions when Miss Richard or Harper, did intervene by encouraging Cassie to leave. She claims Diddy threatened them with statements like, "You want to die today?" and "I end people." Richard said in the lawsuit that Cassie's bravery in suing Diddy empowered her to come forward. She realized her own personal suffering was tied to the many years of abuse by Mr. Combs that had become normalized for her, she said. Now, speaking a little deeper on her trying to help Cassie, first of all, that was very brave. Let's give credit where credit is due. There were men that saw him abusing her, that refused to do anything, and then society coddled and co-signed their lack of action, even if it was just an anonymous tip to the police. But that probably would have not even worked because, remember, he had the police in his pocket as well. But some kind of effort would have been nice. Once again, I think that it is really messed up that it was mostly the women trying to look out for the other women. They could not count on the men in their community and their surroundings to help them at all. And I know people love to come out with excuses. Once again, people love to say, well, that wasn't his daughter, his wife. She wasn't screwing him. Why should he help her, etc., etc.? Well, this is why we're not a community. This is why our community is in shambles, because we don't look out for each other. But then if somebody needed help, those same people who said I shouldn't have to do anything to help anybody would want help if they were in need of help. The hypocrisy of it all, the raggediness of it all. I appreciate the fact that she tried to help Cassie. It was very brave of her, very notable. There was also moments, another article added, that he would also say threatening things to the effect of, and I quote, "I make ninjas go missing," end quote. Whenever she would try to help Cassie, whenever she saw him hurting her, or she would try to get her to leave him, he would get mad. Apparently, there was another incident where she witnessed him throw a pot of scalding eggs at Cassie. And then, because she saw him do that, he pulled her over to the side, once again, issued some more threats. And I quote, "I'm giving you an opportunity. If you want to make it, you'll shut your mouth. If you say anything, there will be consequences," end quote. Now, let's not get this all twisted. She did try to help. The reason why she didn't say anything is not because she didn't want to get paid. Remember, she didn't get paid. He withheld her earnings, allegedly. And also, it wasn't because she wanted more opportunities. This was a safety issue. She had already tried before to help Cassie, and he prevented it from happening. Once again, he had the police in his pocket, so where was she really going to go? What was she going to do? But the fact that she tried, I think that means a lot. Now, another thing this article pointed out that the lawsuit said that she alleged in the lawsuit was that right after she saw Kim Porter leaving the alleged studio with tears in her eyes and a lacerated lip, she saw him later that day, and I quote, "and several other males all having sex with his female assistant at a hotel pool in Glasgow." So basically, he beat this woman, had her leaving the place where they were at crying, allegedly, physically damaged, and then later on didn't care so much the fact that he was carrying on with sexual activities with people like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just assaulted that woman allegedly earlier the day, according to Don Richard. That is the monster that is P. Devil Combs. Now, this particular article mentions, once again, the whole sex trafficking thing, and that these different lawsuits by these different people that I've mentioned on this channel, all these lawsuits that it mentions here, the one by Cassie, the one by Lil Rod, the one by Crystal McKinney, all have been talked about on this channel, how they all mention things of that nature. And this lawsuit with Don Richard is the same. She mentioned that in this lawsuit, which again is, I don't understand why people are so shooketh as to why he's being charged with that. A slew of people have already come out and made these allegations in their lawsuits and otherwise, which they're saying is more than likely what led to the raiding of his home. Now, she was mentioning that she had went to a particular party upon one occasion. She had no choice. Let me go ahead and put that there. And I quote, Richard said in the lawsuit that Combs flew her and others on a private jet to his house in New York for an after party. She recalled seeing copious amounts of illegal drugs being openly consumed and believed that Combs had arranged for dozens of young women and girls, some of whom appeared underage, to be transported to the party where they were given drugs and alcohol, end quote. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at somebody and be like, that girl looks very underage. Now, I understand that some young people, they might have developed faster because of certain hormones in the food, It's all about the food, y'all. What's being put in the air, the water, what's being sprayed on the crops, and other things like genetics and sometimes diseases, disorders. But usually, on most occasions, you can look at a person and tell that they're underaged. Especially when you care enough to actually want to know and not so busy trying to exploit them, take advantage of them, or use them to participate in illegal activities with other people, allegedly. And I quote, "Many of them appeared lethargic or passed out while Mr. Combs and his guests performed sexual acts on them," the complaint said. Miss Richard believed that her presence at the party was a test to see whether Mr. Combs could trust her, end quote. So basically, this is one of those situations where a person's doing something they have no business doing. They want to try and see if a person will go and tell on them, essentially. Let them come in just a little bit through the door so they can see what they're doing that they shouldn't be, and see if they'll go and tell on somebody. See if they haven't learned their lesson after the threats that were issued. Because if she would have said something, then he probably would have went upside her head or worse. And it's not like she could have been able to do anything anyways, because who was going to listen to her? Who? It had nothing to do with trust. It had everything to do with making sure he had manipulated and scared her enough with his threats so that she wouldn't do anything. And again, even if she did, there was nothing that was going to happen. I believe this encouraged him to do more, to cross more lines with her, because he knew she would never be able to get help. That he had manipulated and abused her to a point where she was concerned for her safety to not say anything. And I quote, Richard also said in the suit that during auditions for making the band, she was subjected to verbal abuse by Combs, who allegedly spoke to female contestants in a hostile, condescending manner and made disparaging gender-based comments such as calling contestants fat, ugly, B-words, and hoes. She said she felt threatened and intimidated by his blatant disdain, end quote. I've said before, any man that constantly, very aggressively and violently abuses women, talks about them like a dog, is always saying something rude and mean and disrespectful to women, clearly does not like women. He might like screwing them, but he does not like women. And he has a very deep-rooted issue that is his issue that he needs to take care of. It's not anybody else's fault. It's an issue he needs to address and take care of instead of taking it out on these women. And the audacity of this man to call anybody fat and ugly when he didn't have this same very odd, very demonic, very goofy looking face and dad bod since the 90s. I ain't never seen him with a six-pack. I ain't never seen anybody say, oh, this person is so good looking in my lineup of good looking individuals, and him being anywhere in that lineup. Tell me he's projecting without telling me, or that he was projecting without telling me, because clearly he was. But anyways, and I quote, Combs would regularly be awake for prolonged periods of time, he said, because he allegedly was high on drugs, demanding continuous access to the members of Danity Kane to record or rehearse for 36 to 48 hour stretches without breaks, and forcing the women to choose between eating and sleeping. The devil is a good liar. We would have had to fight that day. I would have got beat up and beat down and monkey stomped, but we would have had to fight that day. And I quote, the 5'4" singer said she lost a significant amount of weight during those extreme conditions and weighed only 100 pounds at one point, end quote. So let me help y'all paint a clearer picture of what was going on here. He allegedly was high on drugs, high out of his mind, which means he's stimulated 25 hours out of the day. Yes, I know what I said. They're the ones actually doing the work, singing, dancing, practicing. I don't know if anybody has had to practice dance routines, but you will be exhausted real fast if you're not in shape, if you don't have the right amount of nutrients in your body. It's not like sitting at a desk. You're up constantly moving around physically. That's not something that most people, especially in this era, if you will, can handle. They were the ones doing the actual work, busting their butts, not being able to eat or sleep because he was making them, under threats and disrespect, continuously work once again like Hebrew slaves. That's something when your own people is working you like a Hebrew slave. And meanwhile, he's the one sitting up talking about they're fat, lazy, ugly. They must not want the opportunity enough, but they're the ones doing all the work while he's over here making them basically be morbidly underweight and subjecting them to inhumane, you may as well say cruel and unusual conditions. Once again, that is the monster that was, is, and still will be P. Devil Combs. Anyways, moving right along to one of the very disturbing parts. I mean, all of that was very disturbing, but this really takes the cake if you ask me. The first incident that takes the cake, if you ask me, was when she had alleged and claimed, and I quote, that Combs would often intrude when she was changing clothes and grope her body and smack her buttocks, end quote. That was a very nice way of saying he put his hands in places where they should not have been. He touched her inappropriately. Now, there were some other people who were explaining this more in detail, saying that whenever they had to do, I guess, costume changes or she had to get fitted for certain clothes to wear, he would come into the changing room and touch her, try to fill up on her. Was calling her fat and ugly, but apparently was interested enough in how she looked to want to touch on her. And that she tried to get him to stop, but he did what he wanted to do. And the reason why I said this was disturbing is because at any moment he could have ordered the people who was working for him away and forced himself on her in that predicament. She was in a very vulnerable position. The other thing that took the cake was whenever she alleged that he assaulted and falsely imprisoned her in a car after a confrontation in December of 2010. And I quote, "While Diddy Dirty Money was performing for a performance on Saturday Night Live, she alleged that Combs publicly berated her and her bandmate Kalenna Harper and raised his arm and swung his fist toward her face but did not strike her when Richard asked him to stop. Instead, his bodyguard allegedly grabbed her and escorted her and her bandmate into a Bad Boy Records Bentley with heavily tinted windows and no interior door handles, where she was locked in for 2 hours with no way to escape," end quote. He literally took this girl after they got into it, and I know it was him. You can say what you want to, but it was him. And you don't ever swing at a woman like that over whatever y'all are arguing about. And locked her and her bandmate in a car that had no interior door handles. He intended to hold them there, to imprison them there on purpose. I would even go so far as to say I believe allegedly he had that car made specifically for that purpose, because who does that? Who has that kind of car? The only way she was able to get out of that situation was by calling her father on Miss Harper's phone to get him to come. He had to drive all the way from Baltimore to New York to try and get his daughter out of that car. Apparently, he was a former singer and drummer by the name of Frank Richard. Shout out to the dad who thought enough of his daughter and cared enough to drop whatever he was doing at the moment to try and come get his baby girl. Shout out to the dad. And when he confronted P. Devil Combs, y'all know what P. Devil Combs said to this man after he confronted him, basically said, "I'm going to report you to the police for what you did to my daughter." His response was, "Think about your daughter's career." Allegedly, his response to Dawn was also allegedly, "Oh, don't ever call your father for nothing unless you're in the hospital. Think about your family." Those are subtle threats, y'all. He basically said, unless you halfway dead or something is wrong with you, don't ever call your dad to come do anything for you concerning me and this business. And think about your family, the safety of your family, before you pull a stunt like that again. Like, this is like mob mentality, y'all. Really, it is. Another sad part about this, another disturbing, really messed up, disgusting thing that people were saying was, "Oh, why didn't she just leave? Why didn't she just walk away? Why'd she keep working with him?" It's like, do you lack common sense or do you lack empathy? Is that empathy lacking thing that has run amok in our society and our communities that I've been talking about through these videos on my channel? Is that what this is again? Because that's what it seems like. For one, people have been saying and acknowledging that this young woman by the name of Dawn Richard, she had a lot going on when she was younger. Apparently, she lived in Louisiana, and her family was devastated by Hurricane Katrina. They lost everything. She was also in a bad contract that P. Devil Combs offered to buy her out of, and he did. So she was going to work with him because she had a sense of loyalty and respect for him helping her. And she thought by working for him, she would be able to make the money that she could to take care of her family, to provide for her family, to dig her family out of the hole that they were in after losing everything. She was trying to help her family, y'all. So for people to sit up and say she should have walked away while she kept working with him, it's real raggedy and disgusting. It's giving, you've never been in this situation and you're throwing rocks, hiding your hand. You're talking about somebody from a privileged perspective. You don't know. You haven't experienced this trauma, but you think you know it all. Get off of your high horse, swallow your pride and your pretentiousness. It's very disgusting. Even his attorney tried to play that card. Oh, well, she kept going to him. But all these people were talking about how he was threatening people around him who he was taking advantage of. So for people once again to fix their raggedy mouths to say she kept going, it's disgusting. Because she was trying to provide for her family and he was threatening her. Now, the other young lady who was a part of Diddy Dirty Money by the name of Kalenna Harper, she put out a statement not too long ago. I'm not going to even waste time reading this statement because it was a load of disrespectful hogwash. And the reason why I say that is because essentially, I'm going to summarize it for y'all. This young lady threw Dawn under the bus, if you ask me. Her whole response was basically, Dawn speaks for herself. What she went through is not what I went through. We had isolated experiences. I wasn't around to see XYZ. Whatever happened to her, and I'm not a witness of it. That's essentially what she said. And I can understand people being scared of what could happen to them if they speak out. But to go out of your way to throw somebody under the bus too, there's a stark difference between I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I'm scared of what could happen to me, and I'm going to completely throw somebody under the bus. Call them out by name and say that I have no idea, no recollection of what happened, what they're talking about. I don't necessarily agree with them. Oh, we're still cool or whatever, but they speak for themselves. When you know that you were there to witness the same things that she did, there's a stark difference there. And once again, a lot of people would argue, well, maybe she was scared. I understand that. But again, what happened to being a community? It's giving you wanted to take the target off of your back and put another one on Dawn's. I just don't think it was right. Some people were saying, once again, we understand if you were scared, but you didn't have to make this statement. Now, there was others arguing, saying that allegedly the reason why P. Devil Combs got arrested when he did was because allegedly he was obstructing justice, harassing, and possibly threatening, allegedly, victims. Allegedly, one of those people was Kalenna Harper. Allegedly, according to the YouTube streets, that's the way I have to say it, y'all. Y'all know I have to say allegedly. He called this woman like 54 times, something along those lines. Called her constantly to try and get in contact with her, to say whatever he had to keep more stuff from coming out, to keep more people from coming out. And I guess he called the right one, because I'm assuming she put this out just because she wanted him to leave her alone. Like I said, I can partially understand, but at the same time, she definitely threw her friend, who I thought was her friend, who we thought was her friend, her bandmate, under the bus. This is why I keep saying ain't no such thing as friends in the industry. Because I don't care how many times he would have called me. I would have rebuked the devil, and I would have told him to go take a hike because I wasn't about to throw her under the bus like that. And allegedly, this is the same Dawn who helped her whenever she was in an abusive relationship with some guy who she yoked herself up with. Once again, there's no such thing as friends in the industry. They don't keep the same energy to help people who have helped them. Anyways, there were a few people on social media who had some choice words to say about, well, people coming for Dawn because of her calling him out. Especially once again, like I said, why you gotta say something now, people. And I quote, somebody on YouTube said, I hate when folks go after Dawn. Even more men were scared to go after Diddy, end quote. And I keep saying this. This man had grown men afraid of him. And I'm not saying that to rub it in some guy's face. This is the truth. There were men afraid of him because of what he'd done to them. But some woman, it's her fault because she didn't say something. She didn't report him to the police. She didn't just walk away. Even though we've seen in all these lawsuits, including the one man so far, there's been another man, but the main guy, Lil Rod, filed was that intimidation, fear tactics, threatening, hurting people were things that he used. These people love to say stuff like, oh, they should have this, that, and the other. But if it was them, they would have done the same thing that all these people who are filing these lawsuits did. As a matter of fact, I have the mind to believe they would have threw people under the bus. Really? Because that's the kind of awful person who would say something like that about somebody they don't know and whose experiences they haven't experienced. Another person on YouTube in the comments said the same thing we've been talking about through all these videos and in this video right here. And I quote, everyone was scared to speak up. So how everybody gonna come for Dawn? Dawn worked for him longer than them all, and her family depended on that money. Her family lost everything, remember? I don't like the Dawn slander. I feel like she spoke up when she was ready. The man had police officers on his payroll, and he was making people disappear. What was the point of calling the police? None of the other victims called the police. I just don't like the slander, and I hope she gets her payout, end quote. And I hope she gets her payout too, whatever amount she's asking for. I hope that they double it. I hope she gets every penny, nickel, dime, quarter, Benjamin, and everything in between and above that's due to her after she had to put up with all the stuff that she has had to put up with over these years. And that way she can also help take care of her family the way she initially wanted to, which was the reason why she was doing all this to begin with. Another person in the YouTube comments said, and I quote, Dawn should be supported just like Cassie, end quote. But there's a lot of people who don't believe that she will be. I think because of the culture, because of the music, the genre, if you will, that a lot of people thought that Cassie was black. She's not actually black. I'm not saying that she shouldn't be supported because she isn't. She deserves all the money, all the restitution, everything that she should be able to get from P. Devil Combs because of what he did. But people tend to forget during these situations that unfortunately, they don't always keep that same energy. Let's just be 100% honest when it comes to black women. And a lot of people might argue, well, Cassie filed her lawsuit first. She was with him for a very long time. I would counter argue that Natanya Rubin, the dark-skinned woman who was allegedly shot in the face by him in the club back in the 90s, filed a lawsuit decades before Cassie did. Allegedly. Y'all know I have to say allegedly. Decades before Cassie came along, she tried to blow the whistle concerning P. Devil Combs. Allegedly, his former bodyguard security, Gene Deal, also tried to blow the whistle back in the 90s, allegedly, about him. But nobody listened to these people. So once again, I don't think it's invalid. It's not a victim mentality, and it's not complaining or whining to point out that they don't always keep the same energy when it comes to black people, especially black women. And we're going to keep pointing it out because black women suffer with these kind of issues in every aspect of life. And as a result, we will keep bringing attention to it. We will keep calling it out. We're glad that Cassie's getting the justice she deserves. We just want the other women who don't look like her as well, who society would deem not worthy, not desirable because of the color of their skin, the shade of their skin. We want them to also get that same restitution as well. Anyways, this was a lot, but it was a discussion that needed to be had. Y'all let me know what y'all think about all of this down in the comments below respectfully. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Y'all all have a very blessed, beautiful, and safe day.